Hi, I'm Emmanuel Xavier, and you're watching Out at the Center. Have you been following MTV's Real World Brooklyn? If so, you probably know that 3 of the housemates interned at the center, and all of them volunteered here for Breaking the Cycle. There was a party on February 11th to celebrate the center appearing on The Real World. Housemates Caitlin, Scott, and Bea showed up to watch it with us. They all became members of the center, and Scott spoke to us about his intention to ride in Breaking the Cycle this year. If you would like to ride with him, volunteer, or donate to the ride, go to gaycenter.org/breakingthecycle. To see more video from the party and behind-the-scenes footage of The Real World at the center, go to gaycenter.org/realworld. The first weeks of February saw intense freedom to marry activity, including a trip to Albany and an action at the Manhattan Marriage License Bureau. Out at the Center was on hand to cover it. See more video and photos at our blog at gaycenter.org/centerblog. On February 3rd, there was a reception to honor the 22 years that Richard Burns has been the executive director of the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Community Center of New York City. You can see video highlights of the reception on the Center blog, and if you would like to make a donation to honor Richard's service to the community, the link is there as well. Before leaving the center after 22 years of service to the community, Richard Burns sat down with Bill Goldstein to talk about the evolution of the center during his time here and what has changed in the LGBT liberation movement over the last 2 decades.
Good afternoon, Richard. Congratulations on your 22 years at the center.
Thank you.
You started here in 1986, and now it's 2009, and you're going to be leaving in February.
It's hard to believe. 22 years went by very quickly.
Looking back to 1986 when you were thinking of coming to the center, I'm curious, what did the center board that existed at that time, what did they ask you?
1986 was, life was so different. In those early days, there were dances and some volunteer-driven cultural programs, and I think what the board of directors of the center at that time was looking for was someone who could come in and develop programming, someone who'd had some experience building an LGBT institution. I had been the editor of Boston's Gay Community News, which was an LGBT news weekly, and there was a nonprofit and actually had a staff of 10 people. And in my role as managing editor there, I'd actually been, had many of the duties similar to that of an executive director. Chris Collins called me up. He served on the center's board at the time and said, would you be interested in talking? I said no.
Oh, really?
The first time. And then they came back about 6 months later, and I said, well, yeah, sure.
And what had changed in those 6 months?
I reached the point where I felt like our community was really in crisis, and I wanted to do something full-time where I was contributing to our community.
Tell me about some of the key steps in the early years or continuing closer to the present that helped make the center a kind of force for political change with New York politicians.
If the center is sort of the grand central station gathering place of New York's queer community, and an elected official or someone running for office wants to speak to that community, here's the place to do it. In April of 1987, then New York State Governor Mario Cuomo came to the center to make his first public address to our community. We've always been lucky to have people like that. In 1992, when we began our program called Promote the Vote, we began to go to the Board of Elections and say, you know, we would like 50,000 voter registration forms, and we would mail them out with our newsletter, Center Happenings, to our entire mailing list. We've just registered 1,000 voters or 2,000 voters, and you know, that's unusual in this community if you're not part of a candidate's machine. This consciousness of social change and moving the levers of political power to move our community forward has got to inform everything we do.
Well, what about this idea of activism and political progress, the idea of progress and a progressive gay community?
From the very first day of the center's existence, it's been the fertile ground in which people in our community could come and organize. We invited Larry Kramer to come speak at the center, and he founded ACT UP. GLAD, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, was founded. You know, there were a group of guys sitting in an auditorium who called a meeting in the 80s who founded Gay Men of African Descent. One of the newest organizations to be founded at the center is called Matayando, and it's for Uruguayan and Argentinian LGBT immigrants.
So some of the other programs that have developed that are not necessarily politically related, I mean some of the family issues.
2009 is the 20th anniversary of the founding of Center Kids. It's grown now to serve literally thousands of LGBT families in a lot of different ways. It continues to provide recreational programming for families with small children, but a lot of its focus is in providing information and assistance to prospective parents. Could gay men partner with lesbians to have children together? I mean, there are all the different ways that we create queer family.
What are the things that you think are going to bear fruit in later years?
Certainly, as the world has changed, as we've achieved progress, our thinking has changed, my thinking has changed, and today the progress we've made around marriage equality is fantastic and shocking. I think certainly no one expected in our lifetimes that lesbians and gay men would be getting married in Massachusetts and California and Connecticut and hopefully soon here in New York State. As our community grows and changes, the center will always be growing and changing to meet those changing needs. To create the structures that we can use to change the world and make it a safer place for future generations of LGBT people.
In June of 2008, several individuals who were active in the gay liberation movement of the late 60s and early 70s held a panel at the center to share their experience. It was sponsored by Services and Advocacy for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Elders, SAGE. The program, called From the Shadows to the Sunlight, focused on the first year of the LGBT movement, from the Stonewall riots of 1969 to the Christopher Street Gay Liberation Day March in 1970. To view video playlists from the entire evening, go to gaycenter.org/out for the link. Now, here are some highlights.
I want to take everybody back to Thursday night, June 26, 1969. If there had been an advertisement for a gathering of homosexuals such as this, we would have been worried about being raided by the police. We lived in the shadows, and on the night of June 27, 1969, we fought back.
One of the myths and falsehoods which really has angered me since day one is, oh gee, they were upset because Judy Garland had died. People in Stonewall were my age group. We didn't give a damn about Judy Garland. It would have been Diana Ross, if anything.
I can't underestimate the importance of what went on at the Stonewall when we decided we were no longer going to tolerate the garbage that had been thrown at us all through the years. But to me, the important work got started in the weeks after the riot, when the first organization was formed, GLF. I want to have a discussion of what went on that first year that led us from the shadows to that first year when we marched into the sunlight, arm in arm, a proud community, into the sheep meadow in Central Park.
If I had to characterize GLF in 2 words, I would say spirit and vision. In terms of concrete things, it's sort of hard to say, because when GLF split into cells, everybody did his or her own thing, and it was sort of anything and everything. In a sense, it was no more crap.
The constant use of consensus at our meetings rather than voting. The idea being that we'd have no losers in GLF. We'd have no alienated minorities within our own alienated minority. Sometimes this worked out beautifully, and at other times this did not work out.
To say the least.
Yeah, to say the least.
That journey to the end of meetings. What would all these meetings end? But somehow or other we meet, and I spent every night of the week. When I started, I lived on the Upper East Side. Ultimately, I moved to the Village because I was spending every night in the Village.
I'm going to introduce another little angle here because, of course, I was a woman in the Gay Liberation Front. So you're all men fighting and arguing with one another, and what does this have to do with you anyway? And so the women started meeting together separately, and we started to feel like, yes, you know, there was something that was not quite right here, that we needed to sort of have a women's arm of the Gay Liberation Front.
GLF literally invented the idea of the gay community. Before that, that idea was just not even imagined.
At this particular moment in New York City, for it to stand up openly, smiling, running, and saying, we are lesbian, we are gay men, come out, come out, come out and join us, was an act of tremendous courage.
2 nights before the first Gay Pride March, there was a gay dance at NYU at Weinstein Hall. About 1 o'clock in the morning, I left with 4 friends, and we were walking along 14th Street to the subway, and we were attacked. We were gay bashed. Some guys got out of a car, called us fags. 2 came up from behind, 2 came from in front of us. I was knocked out in the street. My head was in the blood. The blood was rushing down towards the curb. 2 days later, I had the joy, though, of marching in the first Gay Pride March. I had a great big white bandage on my face, and we pushed our friend, Peter Ruffett, whose ankle was broken, on a wheelchair the entire length of the march. We weren't going to miss it. I don't know if people remember that first march was from the Village up to Central Park to Sheep's Meadow. And my God, there were thousands of us. It was just incredible. I'd never seen so many gay people together in my life. This is what GLF started. GLF, GLA, but mostly GLF organized that first Gay Pride March.
What happened during those years, the result of what happened before, it certainly affected me afterwards. I have been involved in a few things. I'm one of the founders of Lambda Legal Defense and Education Fund.
In June, I believe, of 1970, founded an organization called Gay Youth, which today I was lucky enough to go downstairs, and Jerry took me to see the latest offspring of Gay Youth, the Yes Center here at the Community Center. And I'm a proud papa.
These years in the movement really made a person out of me. They gave me a sense of pride. They gave me a sense of my own possibilities. I discovered that I could speak, that I could lead.
We did not know what was going to happen to us when we not only came out as gay people, but came out as a radical movement. And I think it was a shock wave that went around the world.
The Reverend Roland G. McCauley started the House of Rainbow, a congregation of the Metropolitan Community Church in his native Nigeria. Homophobia and life-threatening persecution forced him to leave his country and go into exile in London. He spoke about his experience on a visit to the center.
Reverend Jide is, as I understand it, an attorney, a pastor, a teacher, a poet, a human rights activist, an LGBT activist, and probably many more things that I haven't, come across in my studies and in following you. So I was wondering if you could first tell us just a little bit about yourself, please.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, the other thing is I'm also a father, so I have a wonderful 16-year-old son. It's more being a pastor and being a liberal theologian that makes me more exciting, and of course reaching out to people that are considered marginalized, ostracized, and of course looking at theology from a very different angle is also part of my main goals at the moment.
Yeah, I was actually one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you a little bit about today is House of Rainbow, and so as I understand it, House of Rainbow Metropolitan Community Church, which you established in Nigeria, I think it was in 2006,
Correct.
Was probably the first LGBT-friendly Christian church in Nigeria, at least that we know about. And so, but I was at an event earlier this week where I think I heard you say that the church has been closed, at least temporarily. Is that correct? And you're no longer living in Nigeria?
Well, yeah, I mean, House of Rainbow Metropolitan Community Church was founded in September 2006. You know, we did a lot of background work, feasibility studies about the need to start the church. I think the first thing is that we estimated that there are about 14 million LGBTI people in Nigeria, and of course we found out that many of them needed a religious Christian community where they can be affirmed and welcome, a space they can freely worship God just as they are. We recently celebrated 2 years of being in Nigeria, so that was a landmark.
Yes, it is.
But we were experiencing media intrusion. You know, there were on-the-ground, you know, journalists in our church who were taking pictures and publishing articles that were seriously homophobic, outing people. And of course, the series of newspaper articles between May 2008 and September 2008, you know, concentrated on myself with my photograph. There are headlines that run from homosexual must die, homosexual pastor on the run, and, you know, we won't succumb to homosexuals. I mean, it was really that bad. Yeah. So we had to close down the church for the safety of the people. We were not closed down by the state or the government, as it was widely reported in the papers.
Yeah, that is what I saw. So what I think you're saying is that it was a choice made by the congregation at this time for safety reasons.
It was a choice that was made by the congregation, and of course, you know, we do have good advice from human rights defenders.
It seems like there's just been this huge surge of anti-LGBTI, you know, just activity and legislation and church activity and so on. Why is that, do you think?
I think we can go back to 2003, of course, when Bishop Jane Robinson was appointed, you know, to New Hampshire, you know, an openly gay bishop. I think this is part of the opera in Nigeria, because the first thing is that the Anglican bishop, the Archbishop of the Anglican Communion in Nigeria obviously objected to that and, you know, said that there are no homosexuals in Nigeria. And of course, it was the same year that I also made a public statement that, yes, there are homosexuals in Nigeria, and I am homosexual, and I'm a Christian. I can't really see how bad it is to be a gay pastor.
Good to hear. So, I had a question for you. I've heard you mention once or twice now about this bill that is currently still very active in in the Nigerian legislature to criminalize same-sex relationships. And I understand that your father, who has over the last couple years, you know, made a few public statements. He's made public statements denouncing the House of Rainbow, and at the same time, you know, and supporting this legislation, and also saying that you are his son and he has all the love and respect for you in the world. So I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how the two of you have reconciled, you know, your relationships as family. He is also a pastor, as I understand, so your relationship as faith leaders, you know, your relationship around LGBT rights advocacy, you know, just all of these very, very complicated dynamics.
Well, I think I'll just start with a little bit of history, and very quickly as well. I came out to my father as gay in 2003. Obviously, it was a shocking moment for him. I mean, if you know, cannot understand, you know, many gay people are probably watching or listening, that, you know, we struggled for many years, you know, trying to come out as gay or lesbian people. But of course, when I came out to my father in 2003, it was shocking for him. Of course, my father has said things like, homosexual people will always be in our society and in our community. So what do? Do we just push them to the edge, or do we try and include them in the society? But he definitely, you know, goes down the line of trying to understand homosexuality.
On the 60th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in December 2008, a statement calling for an end to rights abuses based on sexual orientation and gender identity endorsed by 50 countries was read at the General Assembly of the United Nations. a group of activists from countries where homosexuality and gender identity are severely persecuted, held a panel at the center to explain the difficulties they face.
We're here to represent Africa as a continent because among all the signatories so far to the statement, there's only about 5 or 6 African countries. We know very well that homophobia is a very serious issue in Africa.
The question is not about homosexuality, but about homophobia. So do they, yes or no, support torture, arrest, execution of gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender people?
The government basically chooses to ignore us, and I like being in a context where it's possible for me to go and to raise the issues that are important for me at home at this international level. For small countries, the UN is really a big deal because they know that they're accountable to the UN.
Burundi, it's an African country and it's a poor country. But I think the message came from the UN. The Burundian government will get it more than if it's myself or our group who go to tell it.
I think this has been in many ways a kind of crossroads for the Vatican in particular, because they've had to decide how far they're willing to go in saying, well, homosexuals are humans and we love all human beings, but we just don't think these ones have rights. And it appears that the Vatican is about to make its position clear that it doesn't favor criminalizing homosexual sex. It doesn't favor criminal penalties. And that would be a significant victory, I think, in affirming their own commitment to human rights principles.
We can recognize that historically the thought of church has been against LGBT issues, but we have to recognize too that there is a lot of LGBT people that are under this kind of religions.
Not particular churches, but the church as an institution is a challenge for the LGBT community.
First of all, these are codes. Codification is alien to the spirit of Sharia. It imposes a structure and a system on Sharia which has nothing to do with Islamic jurisprudence. But then in criminalizing sodomy, in these codes, what they have done is to have a heading in the code which says sodomy, lavat. And beneath that, they define it as what? Carnal intercourse against the order of nature, which is a term straight out of the old British criminal code.
It's not only the Vatican and some of the Muslims countries, but economics and politicians have their own interests and that building on these obstacles that we have to face every day.
If we raise the health card, then we will still be, bringing up the issue of stigmatization, ostracization, and denial.
In a lot of countries, the MSM group has lost funding. In Latin America, the UNAIDS program for Latin America has made a public statement against homophobia and transphobia.
When we're talking about sexual workers, what are we talking about? Do we recognize a lot of lesbians within these organizations or not? When we're talking about trans people, we know that many trans people are forced or are limited to be working on this sexual work.
We can think that our alliances must be with the lesbian gay movement, with the human rights movement, but I think they have developed this course, but it is a little work yet with the trans community.
It's a challenge that we have to maintain our focus on this struggle, mainly because we have to protect the achievements we have already gained. But we need to go further.
Now that we are well into the new year, how are your resolutions going? For those of you looking to kick the nicotine habit, we know it's not always easy. Luckily, the Center has a nationally recognized quit smoking program to help you do just that. So even if you're ambivalent about quitting, like Amy in the next video, come and talk to us and see what might work.
Well, yeah, I do know it's bad for me and I shouldn't be doing it, but
Like, I figure since I don't really smoke all that much, I mean, I really only smoke when I go out and drink. And everybody smokes when they go out and drink. And then that really cute girl asked me to go out for a cigarette break with her. So I have 1 or 2, maybe 3, but it's not like I smoke every night. I mean, it's so expensive. And if I didn't smoke, I may even be able to afford the Olivia cruise this year. Not to mention all the books I still have to read and all the papers I still have to write. Oh, I need a cigarette just thinking about it. I mean, I do want to quit. I do, but...
And that's all for this edition of Out at the Center. As the credits roll, we will see more of the viewing party with MTV Real World housemates. Thanks for watching. I'm Emmanuel Xavier. Goodbye.
As my big event for coming out and supporting the center, the work that the center does is just amazing, and throughout my internship at the center, I really found a home there, and I hope that everyone else can too.
Getting real. The real world.
I thought it was a great episode. What I really got out of it was watching heterosexual identified people interact with transgender identified people, and watching the process from first learning about someone who's transgendered and not really knowing anything about their life, and watching them switch over, and the sort of the process in their emotional development, and then suddenly understanding what it feels like to be that person, and watching somebody go from maybe a little hostile to becoming an ally.
I had no idea of the hardships that she had gone through. I had no idea how people were saying things and throwing things and, you know, getting physical. I had no idea about that. So we're getting angry. Why won't you just tell me? But it's because of the history behind it.
I'll be looking for more ways to get involved with the center. I think that it's so important to obviously have a resource like this and a place for people to go and feel included and be involved with other people and other activities.
To volunteer and give your time. I think it's a very, very generous thing to do. So definitely I urge and recommend for anybody that wants to come out to volunteer.
Scott, Bea, you both worked, all of you worked the Breaking the Cycle event at the center. Yeah. What was your experience working that event?
Well, I really enjoyed it, and I'm actually going to be doing the Breaking the Cycle this year. So
I'll be on the sidelines rooting
she'll
along.
She'll be on the sidelines. I'll be pedaling my butt from Boston to New York. So I'm starting to train for that now. I'm really excited. It was very moving being there and seeing everybody and hearing their stories, and it was enough to move me to want to participate.